you can now sequence a whole genome for like $300. There's a lot of different types of biobanks out there. And there's banks that store stem cells and blood and sperm and eggs and, organs and whatever. There's no custodianship and ownership of what happens for the people that actually produce the data that gets generated. And so now these clinics, these hospitals, the ones in which the data was produced, even though it was about a person, they always think that it belongs to them. So they think that like, I'm selling the activity of what happened at my clinic. I'm not selling information about the person. But then the person would say, no, now you have my DNA, you have more personalized information. So you are selling information about me. So this argument is starting to build up more and more of who has rights to what and who doesn't have rights to what. You don't need medical records companies to own your medical information. You can directly send that out. You could own it yourself. There's many things in which you can extend ownership back to the individual user. And that's what blockchains allow.
I'm Misha da Vinci. This is Innoveum, a podcast about people, technology, and how we can build a better future together. In this episode, I'm chatting with Caspar Barnes, founder and CEO at AminoChain, a new startup that's using blockchain technology to entirely transform the future of medical research. Let's dive in. Caspar, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. So I'm really looking forward to learning about you and what you're building at AminoChain. I have to confess, I don't know much about biotech or bioethics. And prepping for this was like, oh, wow, this is a massive world. There's so many layers and aspects to it. And we can't get into all of it. We can only touch on the core components. But it's going to be so interesting. And I think it's something that like every single person should know about. It's like not esoteric at all. It's like everyday life for like all of us. So I'm super excited to dive in. So we're going to talk about all of these things, but let's start with you and with your story. You were born in South Africa. You grew up in the UK and now you live in New York and you're building the tech company. Let's start at the beginning and go for it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, you see, where do we take it from to begin with? I think as you kind of mentioned there, my origin story, my background is that I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa. And I moved to Cape Town when I was around 6 months old as a tiny little baby, my mom, my older sister. And my mom started a charity when she moved over to Cape Town called Yabonga, which helps women with HIV and AIDS get access to antiretroviral treatments and provides homeschooling support towards kids in the townships just outside of Cape Town. And so growing up, I'd spend a lot of my weekends and a lot of my free time with my mom in and out of the townships, playing with kids that were my age. And we had very regular discussions around health equity, around access, around what does it mean to live in this area of town versus this area of town. And especially in post-apartheid South Africa, right? There was always a big emphasis on understanding where does this inequity come from? Why is HIV so prevalent and throughout the general population? What is HIV and what is, how does this affect everybody within the communities in and outside of the cities in Cape Town? And, through all of this lens growing up, we've always had a very big emphasis on understanding why we were grown into a situation of privilege and what we can do to level the playing field throughout our work and throughout our careers. And that has always been a very big, familial value that my mother has instilled in me, but then also the culture of South Africa in the late 90s and early 2000s instilled in me as well. So that's one core thing that's now feeding into the vision of what we're building with AminoChain.
Fantastic.
It's
so fascinating, Caspar, sorry to cut you, but I think solutions for humanity emerge from people's lived experience, not from some sort of theoretical idea of I'm going to solve this problem. Oh, I'm sitting on the outside of the problem. I don't know anything about the problem. I haven't experienced the problem. I haven't been butt up against the problem, but I'm going to solve it. And I think that is a part of the problem.
Yes.
When solutions come from people like you, you've been embedded in it, you've seen it, you've lived it, you've felt it as a child. Now we're talking about true life solutions that are cellular, that actually relate and actually solve real life challenges. So
absolutely.
So your mom, I just want to touch on your mom for a second because I didn't know about this. So that's super exciting. What did your mom think about why was she doing this? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people who were not doing this.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think it's funny you mentioned as well the lived experience that feeds into the passion for what we're building, right? I'm still setting the scene in the context of what actually led to my lived experience that then led to the idea of AminoChain. So we'll touch
Yeah.
on that in a little bit. But yeah, more in the context of my mom, right? So she moved over to South Africa, which is quite a young mother with my sister and I, and wanted to have an impact, right? So you arrive in Cape Town in the late 1990s. Mandela's president. There's a wave of optimism. Things are changing, but there's a health epidemic, right? There's HIV that's running through the country. There's tuberculosis running through the country and so on. And she arrived and she was like, okay, I want to have some sort of impact, but what can I do? You go around to Kalicha in the townships and you ask people, how can I help? You'd set up some sort of infrastructure to try, provide counseling services and so on. And then from one day to the next, she found out straight away that people were leaving babies at the doorstep of this place that she'd sort of invested to set up. And then she was like, well, why the hell would people want to do this to their children? Turns out all of the mothers are suffering from HIV and AIDS. Wow. And they can't afford the antiretroviral therapies, and they're worried about passing on the transmissions to their children. So they think that it's a better life for these kids if they give them to what they assume is an orphanage, but it's not. It was just my mom's like honest attempt at trying to do something. But then very quickly through this sort of field research and this sort of trial and error, she actually discovered that if you empower the mothers in the community, then you actually bridge infrastructure for people to have better after school care, better, staying safe and staying out of bad habits or getting involved in bad friend groups in the townships. You give them advanced, platforms to think about higher education and after school support. And all of these things start by actually just making sure the mothers stay healthy. So that was it. It was like, okay, if you want to have an impact, and then empower the moms and the women in the community. And then, so I think that's what she resonated with, right? And maybe less an angle of, the health aspect. She wasn't a biologist or something like that, but more, okay, I know what it's like to be a single mom with 2 kids, and these guys are all, they're all mothers here as well, and they want to look after their kids. They don't have the capacity to do so. So that's what really resonated with her. And then that's what, I think provided the springboard to actually have an impact on that community outside of South Africa.
Wow, that's good. Good backstory, Caspar. Go ahead. No, what happened next?
This is anyway, yeah. So this is me growing up in Cape Town with, my mom, and she's like, so setting all of this example, right? So we have these discussions very frequently. So this has always been in the back of my head, right? Talking about race equity and inclusion. And with the other thing that then mainly happened was when I was 12 years old, I had something called a malignant melanoma. And that's an aggressive type of skin cancer. And I was really lucky because it was caught super early. And I just needed one big operation to remove this tumor. But that experience threw me into a world of healthcare from a very young age, right?
So I can imagine.
Yeah. So I remember missing like lessons at school, and I would go to these doctors and they would explain the concepts of healthy cells and malignant cells and how cancer spread and so on. And I just, as a 12-year-old, listened with like wide-eyed fascination, just became in love with biology from the moment. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. Yeah. And from that very moment, I knew I had to work in medicine in some capacity. I just really, really like fell in love with biology. So much so that 4 years later, at the age of 16, I was already spending my summers interning at labs, working on oncolytic viral vector research, and ended up doing my undergraduate degree in neuroscience in London, and then ended up doing 2 more graduate degrees in biotechnology and bioethics at Columbia and Harvard Medical School. So I've always loved biology since I was, 12 years old. And the main thing is that I can remember waking up from the surgery, right, where this doctor was standing over the bed. And he was holding this biopsy sample.
Right.
And he was like, check it out. This is what we cut out of your lower back. And I was just like completely enthralled. I said, that's the coolest thing ever. Can I take it home? I want to show my friends at school. They're not going to believe this.
Yeah.
And he said, no, we have to keep it here and we have to study it in the lab so we see how these things spread. And I was too young to understand the ethical connotations of what was going on there. But my mom, again, she said, sure, it's for the good of science. Let's sign this piece of paper and give over the specimen. And we never saw it again. And so many, many years later, when I was at Columbia, I was working in B-cell lymphoma research. I was quite literally in the lab holding another patient's sample. And it kind of hit me. Like, that was the aha moment. I was like, this is insane, because I'm here generating so much information on this human being and their condition.
Yeah.
And they have no idea what I'm doing with that sample. Yeah. And I asked my principal investigator if we can return the information of the studies that we're doing. And she said, I have no idea where that specimen came from. It just came from the biobank. And that really blew my mind, because how many people around the world donate samples every single day as part of their surgeries and procedures? How many of those things are actually used in preclinical assays? And how much time do you then spend trying to refine the same people that have the indications that you just researched on to enroll them into clinical trials? This is completely disconnected. Everybody that donates samples has absolutely no way to stay connected with the value of the donation that comes later. And as a result, you end up with very low consent rates, and particularly incredibly low consent rates for marginalized communities and patients of color. So today we only have 25% of people that actually donate their samples. And the 3/4 of people that don't donate are typically African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, indigenous populations. And so they are periodically left out of preclinical scientific research, which means that eventually all the drugs we create aren't effective for them either.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
No, wow. So again, so someone who is sort of well primed and suited to solving this particular problem, and you know, it really is crucial. I think the best founders and the best builders and creators are people who actually have experienced something and then are like, oh, I feel this in my inside of me. This is a problem. I want to fix it. And as you're speaking, I'm like, I know it, because you know it inside of you. You know, it's not theoretical. I love it. Young boy in South Africa, understanding certain issues with your mom, 12 years old, this medical issue, you see the problem, then you're at school in the UK, and then you're in the US, and you're now in the lab, and you're like seeing it from the other side. You're like, this is a big problem. Specifically, at that point, what was the problem? And then how did you get on this journey of saying, okay, now I'm going to solve the problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the specific problem was, we were in the lab, we were researching new genes that could be indicators for B-cell lymphoma. It's all very, interesting research. And then we found that the gene was present in this one sample. And then I was like, holy moly, we got to tell the patient. Like, obviously, right? Because what if there's somebody that's doing a clinical trial targeting this gene? Yeah. They should know straight away. And they quite literally said, how the hell do you expect us to find who donated the sample? And then that blew my mind. I didn't understand how many people are using samples in labs everywhere. Yeah. And every single time the patients don't know about this. And so then that's what sparked out a better system to keep people engaged with what happens with their tissue when they donate their samples. And it turns out that crypto is a great way to do that. And so that's where the interest in blockchain then came into, right? So the idea of turning a donated biospecimen into a tokenized asset, into an NFT, and then having a distributed architecture, a system, an NFT marketplace that lets you track where the representation of your sample goes throughout the network, means that you have an immutable provenance trail that keeps an encrypted proof of provenance that lets you stay connected with what happens with your samples without compromising on privacy preserving standards. And that's eventually what we decided to build out with AminoChain.
But did you, at that point when you're in the lab and you're looking at and learning about no way to track the biodata, you didn't know about blockchain, or I'm assuming, or did you know about blockchain? Or did you know that blockchain could possibly help solve this problem?
Yeah, no, I had been like flirting with the idea of blockchain beforehand. So I think this was in the lab when there was the eureka moment, being like, oh my goodness, crypto is like a perfect fit for this. And I was like, I need to, okay, and then let me jump into, building a platform that's at the nexus of the two. But beforehand, around the first time I ever heard of crypto in any capacity was like 2014. Somebody at school had some Bitcoin, and I was like, wow, what is that? And then I didn't do anything about it at that time, which is a little bit sad now, but that was like the first time I heard about the technology.
It's a common story, Caspar. It's a many.
I think everybody's heard
about Bitcoin, didn't do anything then. Like now they wish. But to me, Bitcoin and meme coins and all this nonsense, it's literally like the dumbest aspect of, because blockchain is this incredibly transformational, revolutionary technology that changes how humans can function, interact, and behave, and how we can, in the marketplace, outside the marketplace. Oh my God. So let's talk about that.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's talk about your work is at the intersection of medicine and technology and bioethics. And it's this really, really cool space that's really important for like normal people to understand. Why? Talk about that, and then talk about why medicine needs blockchain, or healthcare needs a tool or technology and infrastructure like blockchain, and what impact it has in more general terms. And then let's go on to what you're building and how it works and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So why do people need blockchain, right? Well, what
From a
exactly?
non-monetary perspective, like in everyday real world applications,
Yes.
non-monetary real world applications of blockchain.
Well, the idea of a blockchain is to extend ownership, right, into a digital realm. That's effectively what it does. So if you take that as a concept, it's, instilling trust into software as opposed to centralized intermediaries, right? That might sound like jargon. I've like said it enough times now that I fully understand it, but it basically means that like you don't need all these big institutions to build and manage applications that you rely on today. You could do it automatically with cryptographic software.
Yeah.
And so you don't need banks to send money in between and hold deposits. You don't need, Epic or medical records companies to own your medical information. You can directly send that out. You could own it yourself. There's many things in which you can extend ownership back to the individual user. And that's what blockchains allow. So you can split.
So now relating that to your space and to healthcare and to medical research and to the individual's interaction with these massive systems, centralized systems that currently exist, how does blockchain sort of transform that space in general?
Yeah. So in our direct capacity today, when you have a surgery and you cut out a biopsy sample, you sign a consent document. That signature is effectively an exchange of ownership. It's effectively you giving over the rights to any subsequent benefits of the use of these samples, and any drugs and insights that created now belongs in this weird sense to the scientist that just consented you. Does it actually belong to them? Does it still belong to you? Do you still have any rights to what happens later with it? Right. These questions have really been left unanswered for a long time. And only now are we at the point where we actually have a technology that can give us a little bit, some better solutions to these unanswered questions. We've had many instances like the Henrietta Lacks case, of course, that everybody knows about, where samples aren't consented properly into donation, and then they create hundreds of millions of pharmaceutical value, and the patients that donate these samples don't get any of them. But we had other times which it isn't so black and white, right? We've had cases of like the Havasupai tribe in Arizona state, where they get consented into certain types of research. The researchers use the samples for other things that it wasn't consented for. And what they find out contradicts the previous stories told by the tribe. And that's a huge, the scandal that breaks out and so on. They then reach a settlement and they acknowledge wrongdoing in that instance, right? But then there's other instances like Moore versus the state of California, where somebody would have donated the samples. They were somewhat consented into it, but not exactly. The doctor creates a cell line and makes lots of money on it. The case gets raised all the way to the Supreme Court, and they still rule that the doctor wins, and that any subsequent invention actually belonged to the physician, not to the patient. So,
on the basis of what was the legal basis for the physician winning?
The legal basis there was that the subsequent creation was something that belonged to the doctor using raw material provided by the patient. The raw material wasn't exactly something that the patient still has right to because there was a progeny that came out of it. That's what the court ruled, right? But the point is, the same thing with law. Yeah. There's this huge gray area the whole time, right? The bioethics is a spectrum, and people don't know where to fall on that spectrum. And with blockchain, you can extend full on, ownership rights or custodian, duties into the research realm with what happens with donated samples and data. And so we actually have the flexibility and the tools to create better systems to address this spectrum of bioethical dilemmas.
Sure. So I'm thinking about these big AI systems, these foundation models that are now harvesting our ideas, right? And then, or just all collective knowledge or information that's on the internet, and then they train their models, and then they're like, yeah, whatever, copyright doesn't exist here, but if somebody even OpenAI and DeepSeek came and took all of their stuff and then built on it, they're like, how dare you take our stuff? But they previously just taken all of humanity's stuff and built their model and to build massive trillion-dollar companies. And so it's very, very, it's so laughable, the idiocy of the whole thing. And we know that blockchain can sort of solve that problem. I think similarly in the healthcare space, it looks like this has been happening for a much longer time, because these large language models are just 4 years old. This sort of harvesting of human biodata has been happening for decades, and the medical industry has been profiting off of the data of humans, but as we move forward, isn't that going to accelerate? I mean, personalized medicine, biobanking, all of these DNA companies. Like, this is a colossal issue. The lack of rights and ownership of our own, like, DNA, our cells, our body, our whatever it is that we have, and these companies are taking it and then profiting off of it without us having any rights, any access, any remuneration. Like, talk about what you've learned about this.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. I think the problem arises where people traditionally have had the view that the point of data generation is the one that subsequently owns the data that is produced. So if you go to in the 90s, right, HIPAA was created as a response to people trying to sell de-identified pharmaceutical sales receipts, right? So if you went to the pharmacy and you bought one drug over another drug for your heart condition, people wanted to know which drugs were selling,
right?
And they wanted to know what doctors were prescribing. And in order to do that safely, they said, well, you can sell that data as long as you remove and, 18
Anonymize the data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that was effectively the birth of HIPAA, right? That came around in the late 90s. Problem is, the world has massively changed since the late 90s. You can now sequence a whole genome for, $300. And so this is, that privacy preserving standard is obviously reaching a breaking point where things become more and more re-identifiable. There's no custodianship and ownership of what happens for the people that actually produce the data that gets generated. And so now these clinics, these hospitals, the ones in which the data was produced, even though it was about a person, they always think that it belongs to them. So they think that, like, I'm selling the activity of what happened at my clinic. I'm not selling information about the person. But then the person would say, no, now you have my DNA, you have more personalized information. So you are selling information about me. So this argument is starting to build up more and more of who has rights to what and who doesn't have rights to what. Yeah. And we've only ever seen an instance in which these big institutions keep engulfing more and more data that gets more and more intrusive on the individual.
Yeah.
And I think that, like you said, we could live in a world where there's 4 main AI agents out there that everybody uses and totally is relied on, and they've got a complete monopoly on the entire market. Or we could live in a world that is a lot more democratized, and actually gives a lot more equity back to the people that contribute to making all these research models possible. And that world, if it were to come into fruition, would have to be powered by decentralized cryptographic protocols.
If you're serious about being part of the future, join us at Innoveum. We're a community where innovators, creators, and pioneers come together to learn, collaborate, and launch new things. Get access to exclusive workshops, live events, and meet world-class founders. Join today at innovium.xyz. The future won't wait. Neither should you. Okay, great. So now let's talk about AminoChain. So how does it come about? So you're in New York, you find this stuff out, you said, I'm going to go build a solution for this problem. And I'm the person to do it because you are. It's beautiful. So how does this happen? Next, what happens next? How did you become a founder?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was at Columbia. I finished up my graduate degree. I worked in research, and then I had this moment. And then when I graduated, I decided to really give it a chance. I was like, okay, don't have a lot of money. I'm fresh out of grad school. I'll see what I can see if this idea has legs, and I'll give myself 3 months. And if I can, like,
Cass, hang on a second. Yeah. What was the idea? Like, that core idea? Because I'm sure it's morphed somewhat, but what was that initial thing that you started with?
That was okay. So I'll get at that one point, but the main thing was that I didn't have it clearly cut out yet. So that was the main thing. I was like, I need 3 months to really flesh out the idea, to research, and to see if it has any legs. And the best place to do that was a pre-seed accelerator in New York called Antler. And so I partook in that, and that was a 6-week program. And it happened in a month or 2 after I graduated. And so I said, perfect, here's my 3-month period where I'm going to grind on this idea. I'm going to, research. I'm going to, de-risk whatever I'm trying to work on.
Yeah.
And at the end of this accelerator, I'm either going to get some pre-seed investment or I'm not. And that's binary for me. Like if I make it, then I'll keep going. If I don't, then I won't do it. So the idea that I got into the accelerator with, that initial kernel, right? That was actually creating a decentralized marketplace for stem cell donations.
Ooh,
So that was like
interesting.
in the lab, I got interested with, what's happening with samples, but then I needed like an addressable market. I needed a direct problem that's being felt right now that crypto could solve.
Yeah.
And it turns out that we need around 15,000 stem cell transplants a year for people with blood cancer. We're only doing around 12,000. And that's through all the tools we have available. That's like healthy people donating their samples. That's umbilical cord stem cells. That's, autologous treatments, haploidentical, so from your family. So all the tools that we have available, we're doing 12,000. That means 3,000 people die every year because they can't find a donation.
Mm.
So that's a big thing, right? How do you actually increase the stem cell matchmaking? I started looking into the registries. I'd Be the Match, DKMS, Gift of Life, and looking at how donated stem cells works as an industry today. I found out that healthy people join the registry, they donate stem cells, and the registry sells their cells for $40,000 a graft to the patients.
Up.
Yeah.
They donated it, and the registry turns around and sells it for 40,000, and they get zero. Like,
patients get the donors get like a t-shirt maybe and like a friggin' hot chocolate or something.
But it's criminal.
It is criminal. Yeah. So they're selling for $40,000 per graft.
Oh my goodness.
They're turning over $500 million in yearly revenue, selling other people's donated body parts.
Whoa.
And getting non-profit donations, whatever. They are effective.
And getting non-profit donations. Candles.
Yeah. So they're effectively, but they are registered as a non-profit. So they're not,
I get. Yeah. But still.
But there is a exchange of money for someone else's donated body part. That is categorically happening. It is itemized on a medical receipt. It is,
wow.
So that then really blew my mind because on the registries, if you dig into the participation rates, if you're white, you have a 79% chance of finding a match. And if you're black, you have a 23% chance. And if you're, Hispanic, 48, and Pacific Islander, you're a 42% chance, right? So again, it just digs into why are there so many more, so many more like white people donating on registries? Why are they participating when others aren't? And ultimately, we're working on this altruistic donation model right now, which means you only join the registry because you think it's a good thing to do. Yeah. And being altruistic is something that comes from a position of privilege. If you're not working 4 jobs at the time, you're not thinking about putting food on the table, then you could think about maybe donating blood or doing something nice for someone. Yeah. And that more often than not affects, is the situation that I guess Caucasian people are in. So everything is skewed towards favoring white blood cancer patients. And so then my initial thesis here was there's a market for these things that are donated. Yeah. There's no incentive set up for the personalized donors right now. And there's a huge inequity of who's actually donating. How many more black donors would you have if you let them see where their samples go? And they got a little bit of that $40,000. And so then I said, that's it. Let's make a decentralized marketplace for donated stem cells. Mm-hmm. And that's what I got into the accelerator with.
But then it morphed into something else.
It did.
So tell us about the birth of AminoChain and how it, and what the tech really is.
Totally. Yeah. So then, there was a great idea. We still have a lot of passion for it. I think we still want.
Clearly, I mean, you just talked about 5 minutes. Like it's a problem that you still want to solve, which is great and it really is a problem.
Exactly. There's definitely a problem we still want to solve. But we were trying to boil the ocean. Like it's strategically to actually build a company. It was too much. It was too grandiose an idea to actually set up straight away. And so what we did do, however, was really research into, okay, where do the samples get banked? What does an apheresis center look like? What is a biorepository in general? How do you log the inventories of these different repositories? And the more and more we researched into that, we actually found out that there's a lot of different types of biobanks out there. And there's banks that store stem cells and blood and sperm and eggs and, organs and whatever. But there's also biobanks that store cancer tissue from patients that get used in research studies. And then that really bridged back to what I was doing at Columbia. And I was like, oh, that's right. There's like, a lot of these biobanks, like the ones that we were working with out there, and they have all of these inefficiencies. They don't know who has what samples, where the patients aren't involved in, what happens with that tissue. We have around 200 million samples lying across 2,500 biobanks in the United States today. And we're only using around 10% of all of those samples. So there's a because of a number of reasons. The first is poor financial planning, right? The main thing is that these biobanks aren't, commercially savvy. So they'll go raise money from the NIH. They raise $5 million. They build a fridge. They collect cancer tissue. And then they just go straight back to doing research. And they don't think about the access policy, the distribution model, cost recovery.
Yeah, got it.
That's the number one reason. The second thing is searching for samples. If you're a scientist and you want to get access to breast cancer tissue for your research study, you need to call these individual biobanks up and ask them if they have stuff, or email them. And then they'll print out an Excel spreadsheet and they'll email it to you, and you're back and forth all of the endpoints trying to find what you need.
Yeah.
And the last thing is licensing. Even when you find the thing that you want, it takes you 2 months to actually debate the terms and conditions of a licensing agreement for you to get the samples.
Right.
And so the more we research this, we find that all of these inefficiencies and bottlenecks in, there's no infrastructure for searching for, acquiring, distributing, and licensing preclinical research assets for scientific studies.
Got it.
That's eventually what AminoChain became.
Got it. Okay. So now you're out of the first little accelerator, Antler.
Yeah.
You get money for this project.
Yes. Yeah, we did it. I gave myself the 6 weeks and all I needed.
And then what happens next?
So then, actually concurrently with Antler, I put together a team of folks to compete in a hackathon. And there was a virtual hackathon that was running concurrently with the accelerator. And so I managed to persuade folks to, build a team and then build a prototype around this, decentralized stem cell marketplace that we were imagining.
Got it.
And so we actually won the hackathon, and we won a bunch of cash prize money, and we raised with this accelerator. And I just found a bunch of folks that could join me as engineers. So that was like, great, this is how we get going. And one of those people eventually became my co-founder. So we ended up working very closely together, put a lot of trust into him, and now we've built something really incredible, and we've been working together since those initial hackathon days, which is really cool. But
and then at some point you joined E16Z Crypto's CSX.
Yes, yeah.
But that was the one in London, right? Was it London?
That was one in London, yes, exactly. Yeah. But this whole set of is now in fall 2022.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's this is like early days.
Early days, yeah.
Early days. And then we raised 170K. That was like all we had. And that's all we had to get started. And we stretched that for a whole year, supporting 5 people.
And you were in New York at the time?
And I was in New York.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Ramen noodles for a little bit.
Ramen noodles, yeah. The ramen era, your ramen era. I love it. And then you got into A16Z Crypto's CSX.
Yeah.
And then came out of that, and now you have a nice seed round from A16Z Crypto, and things are going well, obviously. Okay. Tell us about the technology. Like, what is it really? What is AminoChain? Is it a layer 1 blockchain? It does this. It has this on it. It's ZK knowledge proofs are involved. Come on, tell us.
That's great. Yeah. So when we went through the crypto accelerator with A16Z, we were working off the back of our MVP that we built, and that was effectively this distributed node architecture that we designed ourselves. We created a software package that wasn't like a layer 1, validator node or anything like that. It was more like a chain link oracle.
Right.
So more like a tech stack that we came up with ourselves and call it a node, but it's something that has a blockchain wallet inside of it. It has a mechanism to abstract away private keys. It's got a series of APIs that connect to the inventory systems of the biobank, and those APIs connect to on-chain contracts. And in its simplest form, we had 2 contracts on-chain. One would mint the samples, the other one would be a marketplace contract. And that was like basically it.
And what sort of programming language were you using?
Well, that was all Solidity.
Solidity, right. Yeah, okay. And so you have this MVP and you get into the CSX, Crypto Startup School in London. This is 2023, right? CSX was in London was 2023.
It's 2024.
Beginning of 2024, spring 2024.
Spring 24.
Spring 2024. Okay, great. Okay, so what happens?
So we build this MVP. It's going good. We got a few biobanks that are working with us, and it's all going great. System's working, and we then finish the accelerator. We do demo day, and we focus on the raise, right? Because that was like the next thing to happen. We close the raise, and that's good. And now the raise is done, and it's effectively in like August, September.
Right.
And we say, great, let's get back to work. Let's add more biobanks to this MVP system. And then the thing breaks under pressure. It's like, oh, we hit like one massive biobank, and they've got 1 million samples. Do you know how much money it costs to mint 1 million NFTs? It's like really expensive, right? Yeah. Not to mention we then have to get formal provider agreements to do things at scale. And then each one of these people are like, oh, you want to have all these transactions publicly on chain? That's not going to work. And then so there's a lot of like, oh crap, how do we design a more scalable, more privacy preserving system that's more cost effective? And we said, well, it looks like we're actually gonna have to do quite a lot more R&D before we launch something, right? Because this is the MVP wasn't something that it had a lot of growth pains. It's something that worked to prove the concept, but we needed to really go back to building before we could launch something for these guys. Not to mention, we also hit problems on the designs, on the front end development, on the data science, on the data harmonization for searching samples across different inventories. There's a lot of considerations that go into building something like AminoChain, apart from just the crypto, right? So then what we said was like, okay, well, we have all this money now, so let's like hire the people that we want. And boom, we know exactly the key people we want. We spent a lot of time doing good interviews, and now we've got a kick-ass team. And then the next step is, okay, let's design what we want to do and let's build the front end. And then let's work on the data science of it. So like we really harmonize the schema. And now we've invested in machine learning engineers. We're doing a really cool advanced semantic search capabilities, which we can talk about. And all of these things are just getting people onto one interface for searching for and requesting for samples and data across different biobanks. No crypto, just application layer, right?
Right.
Centralized experience, but really nailing sample search.
Right.
And we're working towards, we currently have around 12 biobanks that have signed up or are about to finish up the documents. And we're working towards getting 25 for our launch in mid-May. And then once we have this, we will get everybody on it and they'll all request stuff between each other. And then we will slowly ship in blockchain-enabled features for these people. But we're not going to lead with building the protocol first, right? It's more going to be a centralized experience that people love. It's open access and it's, it's very customized towards them and their search. And then next we'll be, start to ship in features for ZK proofs and returning information and whatever.
So what exactly, I know this thing that you're launching in May, what is it exactly? It's called, I think there's...
Yes, there's AminoChain is what we envision like protocol infrastructure to be.
Right.
We want AminoChain to be the operating system that connects all these enterprise healthcare institutions together in the future. And we want a lot of applications to be built on this
on it.
Yeah.
But right now, what you're building is an application that you will then backfill into the protocol. Sort of.
Exactly. So the protocol can power lots of different applications.
Exactly.
Right? So the first application is what we call the Specimen Center. That's the market.
That's the thing. Right? Yeah, the market.
So this is kind of how it works. Is we get everybody on the Specimen Center.
Yeah.
And that's just the application. We lead with the application layer. And then from that, we ship in the protocol. And now we have application protocol and the protocol powers other apps.
Right. Because why? Why is that smart? Because nobody understands blockchain. Leading with blockchain is infrastructure. It's core infrastructure. It changes what's possible. It allows for ownership. And respecting the individual's rights and ownership of the individual and autonomy and privacy and blah, blah, blah. But nobody understands that because for thousands of years, we have never had that. It's a fundamental change in I think it's the single most important technological revolution in the history of humanity, period. Because it affords us a new behavior in the marketplace never existed before. It allows access. It allows humans to enter into the marketplace and do things that previously required permission. And then the caprices of whoever was in charge that's what you were subjected to. Like, what the heck? I'm born, I'm talented, I'm brilliant. Oh, you can't enter the marketplace because X, Y, and Z person says, yeah, I don't like you. And that's why we have a world that's upside down and problematic, because people are prevented from just doing what they would naturally do in a creative, talented, awesome way, or just getting funding, owning their biodata, getting remuneration for contributing to medical research. And here comes blockchain with this incredible new infrastructure for the future of all things, I think, that's unbelievable. So
Totally agree.
but people don't understand it. People don't get, because this is like they have to change their whole way of thinking to get this new way of being into their brains. And like, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. This is possible. And that's the big sell on blockchain, but people don't get it. But people will understand applications that work better. So you're leading with the application and then in building up.
Exactly. You just lead with an application, and then ship a feature that makes people think it's magic. Like that. Exactly. That is really what you want to do. You just, okay, it's a normal marketplace, but then hang on, I can get like clinical information on this thing that's de-identified. How the hell is that possible? It's de-identified. What do you mean? How am I supposed to find out more data on it? Well, turns out blockchain can keep things connected, and there's zero knowledge technologies, and there's all these other things.
Yeah.
I cannot wait for that eureka moment for when we ship those things, that people will fall off their seats.
Tell us about the Specimen Center is coming out. Who's going to use it? Who's the end user for your Specimen Center?
Yeah, so the Specimen Center is effectively a two-sided marketplace between biobanks, biorepositories, biosample providers, clinical sites, and any type of scientist that's looking to acquire and use samples for their preclinical research. So that could be a pharma company, a biotech, a CRO, or it could be a government lab, an academic scientist, or anybody else.
And so how does that solve? So Specimen Center is sort of like it's two-sided marketplace, B2B, two-sided marketplace. Bigger picture, why should a normal person who's not one of those parties care about what you're building at AminoChain?
Yeah, it's a great point. The infrastructure right now is very much B2B, right? As you mentioned, it's just getting the people that do the work with samples, a system that they enjoy more. And you have to build something for them first and foremost, right? They need a better infrastructure that they love.
Yeah.
If you get all the scientists and all the medics onto the system, then that's great. Why the general person in the street should care about this is because once we have all these doctors on this B2B infrastructure, we can automate benefit sharing for the people that make research possible when stuff goes through our ecosystem. So basically what we could enable in the future is a system today where the African American Hematology Society, they go and consent all of the people in their community into research, and they give personalized conditions for what their samples and data can and can't be used for.
Right.
They then code that as metadata of the tokens, represent their samples. They can track where all of those samples go, and they can earn money back as a community when those things are commercialized or sold. And then that community can sponsor studies into diseases that affect them, like sickle cell or like hypertension or whatever they want. And what you've effectively created there is using blockchain as a platform that automates bringing power, agency, and benefits back to the people that make research possible.
So great. I love it. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay. So, your vision for the future, Caspar.
Yeah.
What's there are two possibilities. There's a future without these blockchain-based solutions, but accelerated by artificial intelligence and all of what's happening right now, like the personalized medicine, the gathering of all of this biodata, the fact that these big genome companies are like storing all of this data, 23andMe, Ancestry, blah, blah, blah. And there's that side of it, the centralized version of this, accelerating medical system. And then there's the decentralized version. So let's talk about the bad version first. 5 years from now, no blockchain, nothing, AminoChain does not exist. The world continues as it is. What does that look like? And then
it doesn't exist. Impossible.
I mean, like, how bad is it going to be if we don't have these new solutions?
Yeah. it's just chaotic. It's completely chaotic. Like if you're using models, you have no idea what the input data was to train them. You're relying on Sam Altman to put the weights on the training nodes in terms of what he deems is safe and effective for an AI to know or to not know or to how they should think. It's there's like zero oversight really into into the tools and the agents that you end up using in that case. You're just trusting these people. And as you can see right now, what's happening on like a global political scale, that just gets so scary so quickly.
So fast, yeah.
So fast, because you end up in a, as great as it will be for economic growth or whatever people are excited about, it's effectively an oligopoly, right? Where you then have like a few people
Very
really
few people.
deciding
Very
how
few. Yeah.
how everyone lives, right?
And what we think and believe and what we think to be true and deleting facts and creating facts. And it's like, yeah, terrifying.
Exactly, right? So you end up with the issues that like aren't even just, scary in terms of like national security or in terms of, nationalism in general, because you'll have DeepSeek just promoting, they say, if you ask it what happened in Tiananmen Square, it says, I don't know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It says, it's just like these things are going to be trained in ways that like we will be dangerously compounded in terms of how people use them. So
Precisely.
it would just be chaotic on the back end. People wouldn't know on the front end. It's, if you had that regulated on crypto, you'd end up being a lot more, safe weighted. You could actually verify these things. If within a world without crypto, things are going to get exacerbated far more than we think right now. So we're already worried about how much Zuck owns our lives and how much, whatever Sam Altman is influencing what we're doing and how we're dependent on TikTok. That's going to, exponentially get worse.
Right. But specific to the medical research field, let's say personalized medicine is accelerating, where people are going to be giving their bio data in order to get that personalized treatment or prescription or whatever it is they're going to get. And so somebody's collecting this information somewhere all the time, everywhere you go all the time. And so what happens if we don't have privacy, we don't have ownership for the individual, if we don't have rights for the individual enabled by blockchain? What does that result in the next 5 years? How do you see that playing out?
It's also incredibly scary because I mean the main worry with exacerbating AI training on existing healthcare data sets is the inherent biases. And so a basic example would be something like, mortality rates amongst maternal mortality rates, that exist naturally today, but Black women have higher mortality rates even when giving birth than any other ethnicity. And that is just the way that the world exists right now for a number of different reasons. But if you train on what is a safe and effective, delivery of a baby versus not, then you could end up with an AI that thinks that Black women are meant to not, give birth as successfully as any other ethnicity, right? So that's like one very basic example, but there are so many inherent biases in medical data that exist today that we are just trusting people to account for, but we have no way of verifying that. And that's incredibly dangerous because then how do you know that this diagnostic tool at the end is actually safe and effective for all types of people, all types of cancer? It cannot be.
Right.
So yeah, that's the main danger I see.
Okay, so that's the bad possibility. Now, along comes Caspar Barnes and AminoChain, utilizing these really cool new decentralizing technologies and building out a better future for us all. What does that look like in 5 years? This goes not exactly the way you want it, because nothing is like that. But if this progresses and evolves and has the impact that you want it to have, what does the future look like? In this space, the future of medicine, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we want AminoChain to be and the world that we want to realize is that in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time, a hospital, a biobank, a pharma company, or a CRO is going to miss out on 30 to 50% of their revenue if they don't run a node in the network. They're not connected with all the other institutions that are running a node as well. And why is that? Well, that's because this blockchain-enabled protocol is the entirely new healthcare on-chain economy that people use to develop their applications, to train their models, to interact with patient data, to recruit patients, to administer clinical studies. And why do that? Because this on-chain protocol has automated ways for the people to get the benefit that they deserve, the right people to be recruited straight away, to bring things out of silos and to keep things connected and interoperable. And it's just so much of an abundantly better way to do things that no one would ever move back to a centralized model. So that's what we want in AminoChain to be.
I love it. Are there other people in building in the space that you don't have to say who they are, but are there any other interesting people building in the space and that you're like, oh yeah, look at the other people are doing this and it's like a few of us doing it? Or what's the size of it? You don't have to, without getting into specifics, you don't need to.
No, of course. So the decentralized science space is still very nascent. Like, I mean, and then people, again, I think we've hopped on a little bit there at the beginning, but they haven't really figured out how to provide value to scientists without launching, like ridiculous tokens and just, that's dangerous, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, so there's a bunch of companies out there that are doing tokenomic based decentralized science. And then there's others that are out there doing like infrastructure based decentralized science. And there's a handful of them and they're doing really successful things. There's a few people there that are more tailored towards clinical, data. There's some people like we're focused on biobanks at the moment.
Yeah.
There's others that are doing, pharmaceutical stuff. So there's just like the world of crypto right now, we can see there's not going to be one chain to rule them all. Of course not. And as a matter of fact, every chain is as successful when it's interoperable with other ones. It'll be the same case for DeSci, right? Maybe there'll be like one big healthcare protocol in Europe and there'll be one big one in America and there'll be one big one in Asia. Texas. It's the same size as the other one. It doesn't really matter. It's like, we all totally respect the other people that are in the space right now. There's a handful of us. There's like 5 to 10 maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, at least we have in common the fact that we're trying to realize the future that doesn't exist.
This is a very challenging time, I think, for humans because we're seeing so much disruption accelerated by the digital technological advancements that are happening at exponential speed. And it's disrupting the world and how the world has functioned and all of our institutions and our systems. And I think people think it's people who are doing it, but it really is, yes, people, but utilizing it's the technological infrastructure that's allowing it to happen, the centralized technological infrastructure that's allowing it to happen. What would you say to someone listening to this about what's hopeful about the future because of what's being built that maybe they don't know about? So let's say, and speaking specifically to your field, what could you say to people? Say, look, I know it looks terrible, but here's why it's not. Here's why as this old world shatters or falls, there's a new one that's emerging, and this is what you can look forward to. What would you say to someone?
That's a really great question. I think it's specifically along the lines of what we're building. Today, people are consented into research for the benefit of scientists and pharma companies. So that you have industry choosing the direction of science. And that's a notion we know across the life sciences, across biomedical research, right?
Yeah.
What you can look forward to and what blockchain will bring and what hopefully will be a part in building is citizen-led science. It is patient-led science. It is them choosing what research needs to be done because it affects them first and foremost, as opposed to market access and the profitability of the drug that comes after.
Yay. Okay, brilliant. So, let's going to take some questions. So we're going to bring people in and they'll pop in and we'll get some questions from them. And then we'll wrap up with you with a few closing questions. And that's it. You look a little tired, Caspar. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm grinding over here.
You're grinding. I'm like, is this a boring conversation? What's going on with Caspar?
No. Late nights and early mornings for a long time. We've got crazy stuff going on, but I'm loving it. No, got a lot of energy.
Okay. So let's see who's coming in with questions. Rich has a question. Rich, go for it.
Excellent presentation, Caspar. Coincidentally, we had stored our son's umbilical cord stem cells within the stem cell bank, and I was looking at their website as you were speaking. They list a bunch of clinical trials, but I have no idea if our cells are banked or if some of our cells have been used in any of those clinical trials and what might have been the outcome or finding. So what you said really reflects, what I see if I go and look at the bank where we had stored our stem cells. I'm wondering with your app as it exists or as it would exist in May, would that give people the power if they were working with a bank that you supported to be able to choose specific clinical trials that might be relevant to, past ancestors and what medical issues that they might have experienced?
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. As the app will exist in May, it won't be able to do just that just yet. But it's as it'll exist this time next year, it will be able to do exactly that. So I think that's exactly the kind of future we want to enable. That gives people a lot more oversight into what actually happens with the samples that they donate, where they are, how they're being used, and personalized access for what they can and can't be used for. Umbilical cord stem cells is one vertical, but you could equally do that for sperm and eggs. You could do it for donated cadavers for like families that get used in research. There's lots of stuff that we want to go down. But yeah, I'm super happy that you get the end game of the app that we want to build.
Absolutely. So anyway, thank you. Very enlightening.
Thank you so much.
Who else? Who has a question? Tatiana? Yes, Tatiana.
Hi, Caspar. I'd like to know if you could talk a bit more about privacy issues that you have on your way, or regulation or technical issues if you're using zero knowledge proof or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The goal is to build a HIPAA and GDPR compliant layer 2 blockchain. So like anybody that goes and sources data from it and builds a decentralized application using information from a hospital or a biobank, all of that compliance is already automated into the backend. So that's what we want to enable. And how do we get to enabling an architecture that allows for that? There's lots of different ways in which you could do it. The biggest consideration of all of these things is the right to be forgotten under GDPR. And if you're able to build something that is effectively compliant for that covenant, then you're able to achieve compliance in other jurisdictions a lot easier. So one way in which you could address that is have chain sharding. You could have certain chains be private in certain environments, and then if somebody wants to opt out, burn that entire chain or discontinue that chain. Another way in which you could do it is you could have a validum approach, which is you have off-chain transactions, you hash them, and you put the Merkle roots of the hashes on chain. So you have a bunch of random Merkle roots there, but no PHI. And so the public ledger is just, encrypted transactions. And then there's others that you could do with ZK proofs as well, like you mentioned, right? So if you, for example, under HIPAA, I'm not too sure about GDPR, but under HIPAA, you just have to remove 18 identifiable markers from a data set to keep it HIPAA compliant and de-identified. So I could have all your information. I could not have your name, email address, social security, whatever, but I could still have a zero knowledge bridge back to your Epic record. And I could query that for clinical insights or new diagnostics or treatment protocols and still not know who you are. And so that's using zero knowledge proofs to get clinical data. All of those things we're exploring, and we'll ship our first cryptographically enabled feature within the next year.
Awesome. Who else has a
Thank you.
question? David?
Caspar, thanks for coming on. That was really eye-opening to me. I guess it was so interesting to me that the statistics you talked about. I live in a place where a majority of the people are Asian or Pacific Islander. So hearing the statistics of how little data they have on it, and a lot of people when they have ailments, they say, "Oh, the medicine didn't really do much for me, but it was expensive." So do you see this as you get more data and more visibility? Do you see it kind of as a way to cure, in a way, medical mistrust with people from different communities?
Categorically so. Yeah. Thank you so much, David. I mean, that the mission and the slogan of the AminoChain protocol is building trust in science and healthcare. The idea is you're not instilling trust into the physician or into the institution. You're instilling the trust into the software that can't lie. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to build more equitable systems on top that automate information or automate benefit sharing. And yeah, the idea is we want to certainly create more personalized care in the future.
Who else has a question? Yes, Maroon.
I just want to ask, do you have a full sequencing protocol for the genomes? And if you are working in this amino chain, do you have also umbilical cord bank for the stem cell?
Yeah, so the providers that we already have in the network are mostly diseased tissue biobanks, so mostly oncology, a couple neurodegenerative biobanks, so like ALS and Parkinson's biobanks. We don't have any allogeneic donation clinics like stem cells or blood at the moment. And we do have some genomic banks as well, right? But the idea really would be to wrap the profile of a cancer sample back to the genomic profile that might be stored in different banks. So yeah, we have half of them. We have the genomics ones, but not the stem cell ones.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions for Caspar? Any other thoughts? Anybody wants a comment? Anybody thinks of school? Mark.
Okay, but the geographic location of the biobanks, are they mainly in North America? Are they all around the world? Or I know you can't say specific ones, but yeah. Any
No,
ideas?
do you know how many biobanks there are down under? There's like so many in Australia. There's hundreds. So we're actually very close to onboarding the University of New South Wales. They got a fantastic repository. But across Adelaide, Canberra, Sydney, they got Melbourne, like Victoria Biobank. There's so many really amazing ones.
But Caspar, I have to interrupt. Mark's a Kiwi.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just be careful.
My bad. Thanks. There's also biobanks in New Zealand, and also people that we're working with actually doing engagement for the Maori people. So there's like specific considerations for consenting Aboriginal folks in Australasia. So sorry, I jumped on your accent too quickly, but yeah, they're all over the world. To answer your question, these biobanks.
No worries. I'm actually originally from Australia, so I've only been in New Zealand 13 years.
Wait, Australia. I was like, because you would have said New Zealand, like with an I for your E instead. So I thought I didn't get it wrong. With my South African accent, I thought I was pretty good at it. But
So Mark, you are an Aussie, not a Kiwi, or are you? What are you?
I'm a dual citizen, yeah.
So you're right, Caspar. You're fine. Right. Right. Any other thoughts, McCain? You have any interesting thoughts to add to this conversation?
I was just thinking that this is an opportune time, given the less than optimal stuff that's happening in the U.S. with the NIH and all of that sort of funding that's getting questioned, that to be able to have transparency in medicine is a thing, and maybe it would also help minimize some conspiracy theories about where things come from when there's another outbreak of some type, right? Whether it's bird flu or another COVID-like thing. So I think this isn't a great project, and good job.
thank you. No, thank you so much. Interesting as well. There was one like investor we were talking to ages ago. Maybe it was just a collaborator, wasn't an investor. He said something along the lines of, you need to think of what your big F up moment is going to be, because everybody has one as a startup. And then he gave the example for Airbnb. The big F up moment was going to be, obviously someone's going to trash a house. You're going to lease it out to someone and they're going to ruin it. What are you going to do when that happens? And then it happened, and then they issued a $1 million insurance policy and they stamped it out, and it's never going to happen again, whatever. He said, what is your F up moment going to be? And then he said, let me think about it for a moment. And then 10 minutes later interrupted me and was like, oh, I thought of it. If you existed 4 years ago, you would have shown American citizens that their samples were in a Wuhan lab before the pandemic broke out. And I'm like, I'm not sure how much we want to be involved in that, right? Like, because that's, you're showing a big granular level. But like you said, it's important, and it's exactly why it's needed. And it's time to hold people accountable to what actually happens with samples and data and funding for scientific research. So hopefully it is an opportune time to be building something like this.
So thanks everybody for the great questions. Hang around. We're going to wrap up some closing questions for Caspar here. So Caspar, you never planned, did you? You didn't plan to be a founder. right? You were going to be, what were you going to be? When you were studying medicine and all of that, did you plan to be a tech founder?
You said plan to be a tech founder. I think I was very
Did
happy.
you imagine that it was going, did you think, oh yeah, that's at some point in my future, I'll probably do that?
No, no, no. You very much got pulled into it, I think. But I mean, it's the coolest thing. I don't know any of the backgrounds of the folks on the call, but I imagine a couple of you would have been founders of something throughout your careers. The experience is very much like falling down the Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, right? Like when you find out something interesting and then you just get sucked in, obsessed by it, and then eventually you can't imagine building anything else. And so that's a super cool thing to have experienced. But when I graduated Columbia, I did everything I could to become a consultant in healthcare. But it didn't.
I got it. I wouldn't put you as a consultant. It wouldn't work. Again, nobody would. You're too consultants have to be like talking a lot of nonsense. They're just saying what the people want to hear rather than the actual truth. And I think you'd probably tell them the truth, and they'd be like, let's fire him. Let's hire somebody that's going to lie to us. But what advice do you have, Caspar, for innovators and founders? I really think that people should be founding and innovating at every age. You can have a whole career and then be like, oh, now I'm going to go and become a founder. Because we have these tools that lots of people can become founders. What advice do you have for innovators and founders? What have you learned in the last few years that will be like, oh my gosh, people should know this, or I'd like to share this, or this was really important to me?
Yeah, the absolute single most important thing is to just not stop trying. Because you can literally only ever fail at a company or at a startup or at a project or an idea or a goal if you stop trying for it. At that point, then it's failed. But if you don't stop trying, then you haven't failed yet. You're just still on your way to the thing. That couldn't be more true for startups. Like, I mean, we really were in the point where that first year, it was hard. It was like super difficult. 14 months of living on like, paying yourself $2,000 a month, if anything, and really trying to stretch that to make anything work. You learn how to be resourceful, but then also, even though you find out everything's not going to work, there's still some angle in which you could explore to build something successful, right? So even if you start off trying to build a cryptographic protocol for biobanking, but you're relentless enough that you end up making a new fashion brand work, it's like it's just down to you, right? So I would say that to anybody, just don't ever stop. You've only failed when you've stopped trying. So
when you're pitching to investors at different points, what was the thing that closed the deal for them? Or what do you think was it that they're like, oh, they just like, bingo, this is good?
Well, I think everybody, for the investors that we work with, right, they've been early stage on both rounds.
Right.
So they typically look at it being like, is this guy operating in a big market? Is there a big like opportunity? Are they going after something in which there's a lot of things they could try and build? And then they probably just look at like the person in front of them and being like, do they look like they have like energy for what they're building? When they talk about things, are they interested and excited on it? Do they have, insights? Are they competitive? That's what I think people screen for. And even if they don't freaking get what I'm talking about, they're just like, whatever. Like, it's, this guy deserves to have some resources to keep trying what he's doing. At least that was like the first two rounds. And then the last one with A16Z was probably a bit more like, okay, it's along the lines of our thesis. It's something we believe in. I think we like your approach. We think that, doing application layer first and then infrastructure is a good way to do it.
Mm.
And so it's a lot of like studying them and your own approach and then seeing what their thesis is and then working backwards from, finding the right investors to back you.
Yeah. What's next for you and AminoChain, right? We know Specimen Center's coming up in May, but what does the roadmap look like?
That is like the biggest thing that we have in front of us right now.
Right.
The main thing that we're really focused on. We got to heads down, shoulder to the grindstone, build for that, make sure we don't mess it up in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that thing goes live,
Mm-hmm.
I think will be like the point when we are released into the Hunger Games, and then we have to like think on our feet and be quick and iterate on the data of, what people like and what they don't like and what's working, what's not working. But for now, it's like build until this milestone, ship the milestone, and then be quick on your feet.
And you're thinking like mid-May, is it?
Yeah, mid-May will be that first launch.
How can people get involved, Caspar, in any aspect of what you're doing?
Yes.
at maybe team, maybe Specimen Center or end user? How can people interact with you, support what the effort is, benefit from what you're doing?
Absolutely. So we are active on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Please do, follow us in our journey. I can drop my handles and the company handles in the chat, or we can send an email afterwards, Misha. I'm not sure how
Yeah,
we
I'll
do it.
send them. Don't worry, I'll get it to them.
Awesome. And so that would be amazing. Just like, share, subscribe, follow. We have a wait list of scientists that we're building out for our launch in May, and a wait list of biobanks that we're building out for our launch in May. So we have that survey link handy. If anybody knows a scientist, if anybody knows a biorepository, Rich, maybe we'd even love to speak with the bank that has your son's stem cells. That'd be pretty cool. Or anything of the sort. Doesn't have to be particularly them.
Yep.
But anything like that would be hugely appreciated. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Okay, Caspar, this is lovely. Thanks for coming on. This is awesome. I'm going to be watching your journey, and we would love to have you back at any point in the future. I think your space is massive and massively important to like regular people, and I think you're going about it in a beautifully right way. And I also think you're the right founder to be doing this. This is deep, honest, true solutions for humanity, which is what technology should be about, giving great value to people. And I think you're doing that beautifully. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun. I hope you've enjoyed hearing all my stories of the last 2 years. Hope I get to see you all again very soon.
Yes, wonderful. See you, Caspar.
Good. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
If you're serious about being part of the future, join us at Innoveum. We're a community where innovators, creators, and pioneers come together to learn, collaborate, and launch new things. Get access to exclusive workshops, live events, and meet world-class founders. Join today at innovium.xyz. The future won't wait. Neither should you.